We live in an unusual town. At first glance, it may seem like just one of those quaint little New England towns, but even those quaint New England towns aren't quite just quaint New England towns. You get a little bit beneath the surface, and you find there's always a great deal going on there. Up the street here at the Amherst typewriter shop, many of you I'm sure you've seen that Bob there has his Smith Corona out in front. He puts it there because he knows that we all walk around with these things in our heads that we don't know what to do with. And it's almost like a little town service. He puts the typewriter out there, so whatever you're walking around with, you can just kind of leave it there and then carry on and forget about it. It's not your problem anymore. Sometimes Bob is in the back of his shop and he's working on an egg beater or whatever it is that he's fixing. It's not just typewriters, computers. He's a very handy guy. And he'll look up and he'll see someone standing out there. And they're standing out there for like a little too long, you know. They're kind of crouched over like this, and you see the perspiration is kind of dropping down onto the paper. And so he waits till he's done with whatever he's doing. He saunters out there to take a look, and there's like this enormous block of text there that's a description of one of life's totally unsolvable problems that someone saw fit to just lay there on his typewriter. So he goes back into his shop, and as often as not, he looks up again 5 or 10 minutes later, and there's someone else out there typing away. He goes out and takes a look, and whoever this person is, they have provided the perfect, the most succinct, the most gorgeous solution to whatever that life problem was that was right above it. So, you know, whether the first person ever comes back to see what the solution is they probably don't. But Bob recognizes the value in these manuscript pages because he knows that they contain something of the soul of our town, which is part of why he's been collecting them over the years. Up until about 2 years ago, he had a stack, I'm serious now, he had a stack of about 2 feet high of manuscript pages that consisting of nothing but this, the passing thoughts of the ladies and wishes, dreams, hopes, and bad jokes of our town. He kept them in the back of his shop until, you may remember that winter 2 years ago when there's so much snow and it just came down and the roof leaked, and that was the end of that. So it was a huge loss for our town. We didn't even know that we lost that. We didn't even know that we had it, but it's gone. Fall comes and it snaps us awake again, and you see things anew. And this is a good thing. We love this because over this course of the summer, your mind starts to kind of blur, you know, with all that heat, and you just stop seeing stuff. And then after a while, you're just sort of waiting with a D through time and not really noticing stuff anymore. And then fall comes, and you wake up again. And we like that because it's Puritan tradition, waking up, awakenings and reawakenings. And you look back at our history, it's just strewn with awakenings of one kind or another. So that's a good thing. We like that. You wake up, fall comes, you see things anew. These beautiful days come, they're so clear-cut. It's like if you've been to the ocean at a certain time of the year, you see that light coming in, and it's like a double light. It's so bright and so clear. And you want to rush to the window thermometer just to look at that number, just to see what it is. Like you might look at the date on a bottle of wine, just to know, you know. When I was young, my mother would always say things like, "What a beautiful day it is," she would say. And it always used to drive me crazy because, like, what are you talking about, what a beautiful day? It always sounded like it had kind of a phony ring to it, like she was trying to convince herself of something. I looked around, I didn't see a beautiful day. I just saw, you know, a ball that needed to be kicked or whatever it was. So you can imagine my horror and distress. I was walking down Hill Street behind the Wildwood Elementary School, and the light was coming in over the school. This was at the end of the day, one of these recent early fall days, and slamming into the sides of those trees up top and just lighting that whole place up. It was like a big green tunnel, this kind of underwater feeling, walking down towards Wildwood Cemetery. And these very words sprang out of my mouth like an idiot. What a beautiful day. And I felt so bad for my son, you know, he's 3.5 years old. So I had to figure it out, like, why am I saying this? Why am I saying this? I'm the perfect person to figure out because I'm the one who said it. So I took a few more steps, and it dawned on me. I mean, it was really no great mystery. When you say things like this, when we say, "What a beautiful day," it's a way of it's a way of reveling in all that you don't control. We're busy people. We're very busy people, and when you do encounter something over which there's no possibility of input from you whatsoever, it's a cause for celebration, right? So we say, what a beautiful day. And this is what happens when you get older. You develop this sense of limits. You develop a sense of proportion. And this is a very New England thing, by the way, this sense of proportion. We live in a very kind of small corner of the country, so this is one of our natural gifts, is this sense of proportion. It's what we have to offer. My son, for instance, 3.5 years old, he wants to be a superhero, and then probably in 10 years he's going to want to be a superstar. And then eventually you get to a point where you sort of lose all that super stuff, and you start paying attention to what's around you. And what's around you is your friends, and what's around you is your family, and what's around you is your town. A town, this is the beautiful thing about a town, is that town is just big enough that it can still actually belong to you. And it does belong to you. This is your town. And this is Amherst Live. You come to us from the Hitchcock Center, which is some kind of a nature center.
Right.
And you do nature-y things.
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit more about the center and what you guys do?
Yeah. So we are an environmental education center that has been around for 50 years in this community. So we are a long-standing tradition.
You've been there how long?
I've been there 7 years.
Okay. Time to go then, right? No.
No.
You don't have to answer that.
No,
Okay.
I'm there for good.
That's good. I appreciate that enthusiasm. Okay, so this is sort of what I want to get to. We live here in this town in large part because it's green around here. It's greener than it is in various cities. And so there's some kind of conscious decision that we've all made, or maybe subconscious, about why this place. And my suspicion is that nature has something to do with it. Mm-hmm. So at the same time, not all of us can get out there and memorize birding books. And I think that we're all conscious of a little bit of a shortfall. It'd be awesome if I could name all those wildflowers, but I name one, I learn it, and then I forget about it in moments.
Right.
So I'm wondering
That's okay.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, I shouldn't feel bad about
No.
that? Okay, so what I was hoping is that you could help us out here for us people who aren't good at that kind of thing. I speak for myself, but could you bring us up to speed a little bit about what's going on seasonally?
Sure.
What should we pay attention to?
Yeah. Well, it's fall, so of course absolutely everything is getting ready for winter. The plants, the animals, mammals, birds, etc. So a lot of, one of the exciting things that's happening right now is hawk migration. If anyone, I'm sure there are plenty of birders out in this audience because Amherst has a huge birding community.
Should we be frightened of that, or?
No, it's a
They're out
special
there.
thing.
Okay, they're peaceful people.
Somewhat,
Sometimes
yeah. I think there's a real hidden competitive edge there.
Yeah.
I would say actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so they put some
as,
of. Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, when you're out with a group of birders, it's sort of like who's going to say what bird you're seeing first, and who actually knows which bird it is.
Yeah, that sounds very intimidating. I'm not a competitive person. Maybe that's why I don't get involved in more nature things.
Right. So hawk migration. Yeah. So hawk migration, the hawks are incredibly efficient long-distance migrators. They manage to do it with very few wing flaps, which is incredibly important because, as you can imagine, it takes a lot of energy to fly south.
They're probably pretty competitive about that too. I did it in Ford.
Actually, a lot of birds and animals will get social at this time of year and not compete. So they'll compete during their breeding seasons. Because they're competing for territory and food and raising their young, but at this time they actually can be much more cooperative and feed together and sort of safety in numbers kind of thing.
Example?
So the hawks will migrate in huge kettles.
I love that word.
They can be
kettles of hawks.
Nice. Yeah,
sounds delicious.
Yeah. So the broadwing hawks wait till midday. It's from mid-September to mid-October, and they'll wait for the air to start to warm up, and they'll start to ride thermals of warm air, and they'll spiral their way up, 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 so high you can't even see them with the naked eye. And then they glide out towards
Florida.
Yeah, using gravity, and then catch the next thermal. So it's incredibly efficient. I was just reading that turkey vultures have been recorded to soar for 6 hours without a single wing flap.
Wow. So they just hang out there. It's like flying to England, except no movie. So how do they know? Sorry. How do they know how when to stop going up? I mean, is it when they can't breathe anymore, or are they just that's good enough? Let's go.
Yeah, I think it's you get to a certain height, and I imagine the sort of differential of the
It's a
warm
surprising
air
fact because you sort of feel those hawks kind of above you, and they're kind of like nature's drones, But it's cool because they're not after us,
No.
So it's a happy season for the vermin because they're like, they're done, they're gone.
Right.
Let's so that the rats come out and party when this happens, or is there a big rat party somewhere?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're all everything else is focused on gorging themselves as well. So it's sort of a time where everything is just sort of really focused on.
Okay, I seem to recall we were talking earlier a little bit about this, and there's a moon component to this. What's the moon component?
Well, so the many of the other small birds, the songbirds and things, will migrate at night. And so it would be a perfect night tonight, actually, if we had a spotting scope to put at the full moon. And you can actually watch groups of migrating birds that migrate they start migrating at dusk. And we don't know fully how they navigate their way south to they'll end up within 6 to 12 miles of where they were before.
Right.
But it seems to be a combination of geographical landmarks and the stars.
Yeah, okay. So do you have...
So you can watch that through a scope on a full moon,
Right.
which is pretty
So
sweet
there's
thing.
hordes of birders go out and full moon night and watch?
I don't think it's a hordes
Not
of
hordes.
birders kind of thing. I think
Kettles.
it's one of those ones that maybe people do more solitarily. I'm not sure.
Okay, solitary moonlight bird watching. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's cool. The hawk thing, we're going to look out for that, although it doesn't sound like you can see them because they're so high, but it's nice just to think of them.
You can, and you can sort of watch them. I mean, Mount Tom is a great place to go watch them.
Yeah, okay.
Because you can kind of watch them ride the thermals up against the edge of the mountain.
Okay,
So
so that's a
actually-
good spot. I was going to ask
yeah.
you where the thermals, that makes
Yep.
sense, okay.
Yep.
So is there a foliage component here?
Sure,
We covered
yeah.
birds.
Yeah, so the trees,
Yeah.
obviously, they do, to prepare for winter, they do not want to lose water. And so they will actually sort of create a callus spot to make the leaves sort of stop getting their water and nutrients, so they stop producing chlorophyll and will fall,
They
turn whatever their actual pigment is and fall off, and that's a way to sort of protect themselves from desiccation.
I didn't know that. So it's the tree that turns off the spigot, like you're done.
Yeah.
Get off the tap.
Right, like
Okay.
I can't support all you leaves, so
Yeah.
we gotta
all
get
right.
off for the winter.
That changes my view. I always thought it was like a,
But then at the same time, they are producing all their seeds. They're sort of making this last-ditch effort to sort of produce
Right.
as much
But
offspring as possible.
Right, I mean, that makes sense. I guess what I forgot is like the tree's in control. The tree's calling the shots here. We tend to pay attention to the leaves, but it's, okay. All right, what else, is there anything else you want to throw my way before? Because I have a long list of silly questions that I'd like to ask. Well, not that long.
Oh, well, I mean, questions are good. I think just the other thing is the gorging is really interesting at this time of year. I mean, a lot of animals
I did some of that earlier.
Yeah, a lot of animals are, just eating. Chipmunks are storing these huge, caches of food down under the ground.
Yeah.
They've been known to carry just obscene quantities of things in their cheeks.
Uh-huh.
Bears will be eating so much that they'll actually double their weight.
Uh-huh. It's a full-time job.
Before winter, so then
Yeah.
they can kind of sleep off.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah.
The squirrels and the chipmunks, well, I might as well ask you about this. I was wondering about like the difference in how they get along, Because I was always sort of conscious that these guys kind of occupy the same lawn, like mine.
Right.
They hang out there.
Yeah, but you don't see them together, do you?
Yeah, no, they don't.
No,
and I thought,
no.
well, geez, maybe this is like a Hatfield McCoy thing, like. How do these guys get along?
They don't.
Do they have a go-between? You know, like.
They don't get along. I mean,
don't?
you never see them.
Because I always like the chipmunks better. So if it was
really?
like a sports event, I'd go for the, because they're a little cuter.
Yeah. They tend to be more sort of aggressive and
fidgety.
too.
They're fidgety.
Yeah, they bolt off much faster.
Yeah, they're kind of cuter.
Yeah, the red squirrels are really they're nasty.
They're the bad guys?
They're the ones that will yell at you.
They'll yell. Okay, I'll stay out of their way.
Right.
That's good to know. Okay, here's one for you. And this happened more during the summer, but I just love it because I'm going to be wondering about this all winter if I don't. If you don't clear this up for me. Like when I'm walking down my street, as often as not, like a bug will appear in front of my eye.
Okay.
And it just hangs out there and kind of buzzes around.
Oh.
And I'm thinking, does my eye smell funny? You know? I don't even know, it's a small thing.
I mean, I don't know.
And then I go like
Maybe
this, and I feel bad because I think, maybe he was trying to tell me something, you know? Like,
Your eye.
my friend got caught in a ditch, you know, like trying to tell me, and I just batted it away.
Yeah.
Why do they like
it would
my...
depend on what kind of bug
Yeah.
and what they wanted. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, let's see. Moose. This is something I got a little bit of a head start on this because I read in the Gazette, our local paper, that it's rutting season.
It's rutting
this
season
is
for
what you
moose,
didn't mention is, you know, it's hoarding time and fleeing time, but you didn't mention rutting.
You're right. So a lot of
Let's talk
animals,
about-
are actually, the deer and the moose are rutting right now, which is breeding.
Yeah, this is their time for that.
This is their time for that, so then the sort of gestation happens through winter. And so a lot of animals will do that, you know, where they'll sort of have their young, you know, towards the end, towards spring, sort of so they'll breed in the fall. So the moose are sort of roaming far and wide right now. This is the time that you might actually see them because they're going to roam further looking for a mate. And, you know, they do all sorts of weird things. Like, you know, they make these I think they're called wallows. I'm not sure where they pee and they make these nests. They pee and then they get the other moose to come and roll. Anyway.
No, this is good. This is what we're here for.
Right. Okay. So let me start over. So the male moose will pee. You sort of make an area to pee in and then roll in it, and that gets it like gets that waddle. I forget what that's called actually. Soaked in urine.
Yeah.
Because
he can't pee on his own neck, so he has to.
So then that will be the way that he then walks around and emits the sort of pheromones.
Yeah.
And then
Check it
the
out,
female will kind of test out the different, I think they're called wallows, I can't remember, will roll in them as well to sort of test out the different males.
Yeah. Okay. Who are we to say, you know? I mean. And the piece in the Gazette was be careful driving because love struck moose, and I think that was the phrase they used. You know, they're not going to pay any attention to you, because they're on the trail of some hot waddle or whatever.
And I think they're known, like they don't have as much eye shine too, so that we're more likely
and the
to
same
not see
is really true of UMass students. You know, this particularly this time of season. Okay, so we're going to have to leave it there for now. That was lots of fun. Please give it up, Casey Beebe. Poetry is woven into the very fabric of the town. You know, even on my street, in fact, there's one of these little sort of birdhouses with a little door that you open. You reach inside, and you know, there's Longfellow and Whitman in there, and there's a little bench beneath the poetry house there, and it says poetry above it. You know, I mean, and these things are everywhere. They're like fire hydrants, and just in Amherst, you know, this is what we do, and it's actually kind of cool that we have both Dickinson and Frost, because they're both nature poets in a way, but they're also very different. And so it's something we can squabble about. You know, for people who love squabbling, it's an enormous opportunity. I have a friend who summed up his feelings about Frost by quoting Frost's Frost's wife's words from her deathbed. Apparently, her last words were, "Keep that man away from me," and that's how best summarized his feelings about Frost. And by the same token, I have another friend who never tires of fiendishly reminding me that anything that Emily Dickinson ever wrote can be sung to the tune of The Yellow Rose of Texas. Just when I forget that, he says it again, and I'm sorry. But So anyway, we should talk about poetry, and we have someone here who's going to help us do that. She lives in Amherst. Her mailbox is actually across the street in Pelham, but we're forgiving people. We can get over that. Please join me in welcoming Karen Schofield. So, Frost or Dickinson?
You start me with such a hard question.
Yes, it's all going to be easy after this.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, I would have to say for me that's Dickinson.
I would have guessed.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Dickinson
I'll have to ask
person.
you later about that.
Yeah.
But she was a poet who really transcended the poetics of her time, and some of the things that she was trying out in her writing is exactly, the things that are happening now in poetry, and so that's very exciting to have that as a base for some of the things that go on today.
Okay, so she was like a frontier breaker, where Frost was kind of pulling up the rear in some ways.
Yeah, he was. He was coming along at that.
Yeah.
Okay, I would never have said that. But he was coming along at the end of a certain era of poetry.
Yeah, and he did it well too.
And he did it very well.
Yes.
And
okay.
beautifully.
Yeah, so don't hate on Frost.
Nope.
I don't know why you're doing that.
Okay.
What can you tell us about how to kind of shift us into that poetry headspace? My guess, and I could be totally wrong about this, is that that your life and the way that you experience your life is going to be a lot richer than mine, simply because you're more attuned to things that I'm like, poetry, Or,
Well, I do think my life is richer than yours, but it's not because of poetry.
yeah. Yeah.
I wish that were true. I do think poetry brings me great joy.
Yeah.
But there are, of course, many other things that bring me absolute and wonderful joy. I don't think I look at the butterfly any differently than you do. I just don't think I do. Do I spend more time thinking about the image of what I've just seen? Perhaps. But I'm not even sure that's true.
Like occupationally, like I'm a poet, I should be thinking about this, whatever, in a poety way now. Or?
Well, there's certainly. Gosh, I wish because that makes it sound really lovely and ethereal.
Yeah.
And it's really hard work.
Yeah, it is.
And it's hard and frustrating and a whole, everything that any job can be.
Yeah.
And
it sounds miserable.
Yes, sometimes. But anyone here has had sad moments in their work where it hasn't felt fulfilling, and you're like, why do I keep doing this? So I think anyone, whether you write or not, has those types of
moments. Right. Okay. So I mean, I've read some of your poetry, and it occurs to me that one of the things that poetry does for us is it's a way to kind of break the frame and kind of get you off script and seeing things in a somewhat different way.
Sure.
And it's not really until you do that you realize really how on script you've been, like yada yada. We're talking about the seasons before. That's something also that kind of breaks that frame and kind of snaps you awake. I just remember reading one of your poems. It was from the point of view of a mollusk. Can you remember that one?
Yes.
Okay. Like, so how often would you have an excuse to
Was it from the point of view? Okay, keep going.
At some point, I mean, there was at least a line.
Oh,
where,
you're right.
Like,
I just thought of the line. God, you know my stuff better than I do.
What was? Do you remember the line?
I thought it was the voice of the mollusk speaking, because there's someone who's holding them this huge. I mean, this thing's giant.
Yeah.
And so this young guy is holding it up, and he says, "I'm going to crack it open."
Yeah.
And I'm horrified.
Yeah.
And I should say the speaker.
Yeah.
But this is one of the things that really did mirror life. That he's holding this thing aloft, and he's ready to just crash it down onto the rocks. This is in California, and I yelled no, and I yell it, and I'm so surprised that I'm able to yell over the sound of the surf, and yell it so that he can hear me, because I'm not standing right next to him.
Yeah.
And that's the line. At first, I thought it was the voice of the mollusk speaking. So how funny that you know that.
No, that's the best example, because I mean the takeaway there for me is that there's some places that you'd like to go or you need to go in life in order to do whatever you need to do, but you're not going to be able to get there unless you can kind of make these kind of weird jumps. And sometimes poetry is the only thing that, I mean, how else are you going to get inside the head of a mollusk?
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that one of the great things about poetry, other forms of writing, other types of art
Yeah.
that really help that sort of that transcendence to make that leap.
Right, okay. So we're particularly interested in what we can do to make this really concrete for someone who's not very clever like me. And I see that you have a book here for me.
Yeah.
I assume that's for me.
It is. Well, we had been talking earlier about bringing things that are perhaps a little more concrete, some examples of more concrete things in, and talking about that. So I brought in the book. This is Checked Out OK by Corwin Erickson. It is a book of found poetry in which he took the police logs, which we all love. I don't know anyone who doesn't love the Amherst police log.
Yeah.
And he took logs from Amherst, Montague, and Greenfield, and turned them into this book. He edited, compiled, removed the names of people whose names should be removed, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And turned it into this. And Checked Out OK is a line that, for those of you who are very familiar with the police logs, because you read them every week, have heard over and over again, that the police went and that something was all right.
Yeah.
When they
Subscribe, by the way, to your local newspaper.
went. Yeah. Well, if they get the Amherst Bulletin, like, it arrives in the mailbox.
Yeah, they sneak poetry in there. You don't even know it. But
It's true. It's
Okay.
true. Written by the dispatchers, no
Right.
doubt. So I marked a couple of things, and I'm actually wondering if you wouldn't mind reading it.
what?
Yes.
Sure, okay,
Yes.
yeah.
See, there. Even though that first poem that you pulled out of the box confounded you.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if I
All
can do
right.
better.
So I marked them with.
I hope the print is bigger than the last one.
I think the first.
Oh,
one's
okay.
over there.
7:49. Police received a complaint from the jail on Elm Street that there were two women outside the fence flashing their stuff. It was not specified what kind of stuff they flashed. Officer sent. No, I can see the poetry in that. Yeah. I wish I could see it closer, you know. 12:33 p.m., police are investigating a report from a woman who went to the University Health Center after feeling ill. The woman said an acquaintance may have drugged her while she was eating porridge.
I mean, isn't it great that it was porridge? It wasn't oatmeal.
Yeah. Now,
Isn't
that sounds like an old
fantastic?
one. I mean, what's the date
It's
on that one,
porridge.
you know? That was from a very old, okay. Oh, okay, it's a somewhat longer one. A resident of Hedgerow Lane called police at 12:30 p.m. to report a 12 to 14-inch snake in his kitchen. He refused to touch it, but said he had it contained under a mixing bowl until the animal welfare officer could respond. The animal welfare officer reported finding a 4-inch long garter snake, which he picked up and put outside in the garden.
Wait, did that say it was a man who had reported it?
Oh, that's a great narrative. Okay, well, one more, last one. Police were called at 5:52 p.m. Police were called to the New Market Center for a truck which had a cooler on its bed and a sign attached to it that read "Dangerous." The cooler checked out okay. Okay, so
Look at that.
yeah. I see. It wasn't as painful as I thought it would be.
No, see?
But it also occurs to me that you just sort of coerced me into doing a poetry reading.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so it seems to me only fair that quid pro quo.
I'll read whatever you want.
No, I want one of yours. Do you have one?
As in,
As in from right out of your lobe, Athena-wise. Can you do it?
yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
Right now, you know.
Hit me.
Okay. 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 This is called Spackler's Lament. And I wrote it after spending a day spackling and prepping a wall to paint in my house. And after doing that, I began to wonder, well, what would it be like? How would it change my worldview if I did this job all day, every day? So this is Spackler's Lament. All over the city, pockmarks in cement. imperfect surfaces, macadams, undulations, rounded edges where hard corners should reign, stop signs with bullet holes, loose screws at the playground, holes to be, beehives, doorways that never close, the space between bars at zoos and jails, the madness of chain link fences, certain yoga poses, windows rolled down, someone beautiful leaning out of the taxi, calling in Spanish or Catalan, clouds torn by the wind and patched again, above them, faint craters of a daytime moon. The countries know better. Ragged shagbark, the emptiness formed by a squirrel's tail touching its back, holes in the snow, the indentation made before the seed drops in, the very thought of seed cavities, blue bottles lined on a windowsill, your windowsill, in the country, your face with a mouth, Victorian trim. In the yard, a girl's hands cupped around broken blue eggs, guarding only the speckled idea of the bird. Thank you.
So it was a day of civic unrest and near martial law in Boston when I found the dead moose. There had been a rolling gun battle in the streets of Cambridge, and the younger Tsarnaev brother was still on the lam. I was working at UMass, and I must have heard dozens of students say into their phones, "Mom, he's not from this UMass." I still had a few pounds of papers to grade, but UMass looked like it was just an unattended backpack away from a total clampdown. So I fled and bolted into the woods as soon as I got home. I took a long ramble, and I wasn't looking forward to walking back through the flooded beaver pond, but it was after sunset, and that was the most direct route home. And that's when I found the moose carcass. I really love that area. I love the ponds, the cliffs, all the animals I see. I even like the power lines themselves. But I've learned to be careful there. It can be dangerous. That's where I went nose to muzzle with a coyote and chest to chest with a duck hunter. It's where a gang of deer hunters from out of town stopped me and asked me if I were on a nature walk and told me to be more careful. And I hate it when hunters tell me to be careful. I hate wearing orange. I won't wear bells. It's the Elmer Fudds and Dick Cheneys who should be careful. That's where I found a pile of stolen American flags. I know where there's a animal grave site and a grow site that gets raided by commandos from helicopters. I know where there's dump sites. Once my neighbor called me. She's the principal of a girls' high school in a prison, to tell me that there was a deer carcass frozen into the pond there. So me and my other neighbor, she's the elementary school secretary, we skied out there to go look at it. And it looked like a burst, bloody bugle on the skin of the pond, with the ice pockmarked by paw prints congregating on it from every direction. Once I found a turkey carcass on the ice, and beside it was its frozen, eviscerated, fist-sized heart rocking in the breeze. And I took a picture of it, and I used that to illustrate the concepts of uncanny and unheimlich, for a community college class where I was teaching an Edgar Allan Poe story, and where I caught some hell for it from some easily offended and quick to complain students. So I'm cautious when I'm there. The moose carcass was imposing. It was architecturally large. It was out of proportion to the area. I'd never seen anything like it there. I was really excited. I rushed home with squeaking boots and wet socks, hatching plans. That carcass, it was on its side on a boggy sump, and the exposed side had been opened up by scavengers already and mostly skeletalized. The underside was still intact and not yet putrid, and the contents of the rumen smelled a little beery. It didn't have antlers, and I didn't know what had killed it. I don't think it was possible that it was roadkill, and I'm not sure you can kill a moose by accident by shooting it, or shoot a moose by accident, I should say. I hoped it was disease or old age. If it was a predator, then something capable of killing and eating me was nearby. So in the twilight, I rushed back, thinking what I needed to do next was to find someone to come help me poke it with a stick. And it's interesting how quickly you can sort through your list of friends and arrive at the guy who wants to come see a dead moose and be cool about it. My friend Dale was the obvious answer. So as soon as I got back, I emailed him a photo of it. And he called me on the phone seemingly before I'd ever even pressed send and said he'd be right up. He just had to get home from work, tell his wife, change his clothes, get his dog in his truck, and he'd be right here. So Dale picked me up and we drove out there in his 4x4. I sat in his dog's seat, and Sweetie, his ancient, arthritic, and possibly blind and deaf dog, sat on me, and I rested my feet on his enormous, unliftable tow chain in the seat well. We got out there easily enough, despite the hub-deep, flooded pond, and when we found the carcass again, Dale gently lifted Sweetie out, and while Dale and I discussed the demise of the moose, Sweetie waded out into the swamp and settled herself inside the carcass, lapping at the gore-streaked water. I watched flotillas of ticks, too bloated and fat and round to swim properly, push off the carcass toward her. Sweetie looked blissed out. The three of us were there out of curiosity, but also because I wanted the skull. Dale and I took a look at it. We figured female moose don't have antlers, but this could be a bull that had dropped his already. Dale asked if I had checked for a penis, and I said, yeah, but not carefully. So he hefted up a leg, and we took a look, and then we agreed that if there had been a penis there, we would have seen it, unless it had been eaten off. We unpacked and took inventory. I had trash bags, a flashlight, my hatchet, my pruning shears, my sheath knife, my folding saw. Dale had trash bags, a headlamp, his folding saw, a clasp knife, an axe, a machete, loppers, chains, bear repellent, thick rubber gloves, snacks, and an enormous pair of snowshoes for standing in the swamp, most of which I think are just standard issue from his truck anyway. It was obvious that the axe was the right tool to begin the job. I stopped Dale and said, "I think I should do it." And he said, "Why? For religious reasons?" And I said, "No, because it's disgusting and I'm going to keep the skull, so I should do it." He reminded me that it was his axe, so I stepped back and he swung and severed the nape. After that, we took turns trying out most of our tools. The tissue was easy, but the hide was tough. And I was making a hash of it with my sheath knife when Dale took over with his big clasp knife, and he made short work of it. Dale told me I needed to sharpen my knife, and I felt like a sidekick. After we'd done our job, we bundled the head home in the trash bags. We tidied up the carcass and smoothed over some of our tracks and went back to my house. There, we decided not to put it on top of my garage or in my cold frame, and instead made a makeshift cage and partially buried it, and then stacked heavy two-man boulders on top of it. That's to keep the big scavengers away, but to let the bugs and the microbes in. That very next day, Dale and I were on a hike with friends that we'd planned weeks ago. Bear Mountain was covered with moose poop. It was everywhere. It was our main topic of conversation. Dale and I kept catching each other's eyes. Moose poop, I should say, looks like milk duds, while deer scat say looks like raisinets. So while Dale and I locked eyes, I was dying to blurt out, "Me and Dale decapitated a moose last night. Maybe even this one." But mixed company and the greater pleasure of keeping it a secret kept me shut up. That next Monday, I was back at school in the classroom, collecting assignments and excuses from my students. The global supply of printer ink had run dry. Laptops had self-radicalized and slunk off to join terror cells. Invisible demons from cyberspace ate emails. It's easier to be lied to when you can look someone in the eye and think about decapitating a moose. A few weeks later, that stack of stones we'd made was torn apart, and I was struggling to rebuild it. And my neighbor must have heard me and came up the back path through the woods. My neighbor's an all-weather nudist, but that day he was wearing a nylon windbreaker and his slit to the hips green jogging shorts, which I think are his driving togs. He asked if I were making a cairn, which he knows I like to do. And I said I was, sort of, but I was rebuilding one that a bear had destroyed to get at a moose head. He said he could smell it. So we crouched down together and looked through the cracks in the rocks at the carpet beetles and the maggots in the eye socket. A few months later, absolutely every bit of that huge carcass was gone. I kept finding the spine and the rib cage in the woods and taking it back and stashing it under a cliff, each time with a few less vertebrae attached. I finally took it home in a pillowcase. I disinterred the head, soaked it a while, cleaned it, and detailed it with my mother's old dental hygienist tools. That's where those tools have been. The head, or which is now a skull, wasn't a memento mori to me, and it wasn't an album cover worthy symbol of morbidity. What was uncanny was how quickly and utterly that huge carcass had been disappeared and not become a ruin like the field stone structures in the old mill dams and cellar holes that are all over that area. What was unheimlich about the skull was how bird-like and fragile it was. Its long, slender muzzle and zygomatic arches. What might also be a little bit weird was how careful and tender I'd been with it for so long. Thank you very much.
In the morning, in the backyard, a chair to wonder how life got so small. Could this be all there is? Through the screen door, cups and saucers, chirping like birds, well, she'll be okay. I can get away for a while. 'Cause something's gnawing, it's always nagging. I gotta do something before it's too late.